I should have known that falling for a barista who treated everyone like his soulmate was a losing game, but that didn't stop my heart from shattering the moment he leaned in to whisper to someone else. I shoved my pencils into my bag, chest tight with the familiar sting of rejection, and turned to walk out of this cafe for the last time. My pride was wounded, my sketchbook was tucked under my arm, and I was seconds away from disappearing back into my lonely life. But then his voice cut through the noise, calling my name with a tone that made me freeze in my tracks. I turned around, expecting a polite goodbye, only to find him blocking my path with an intensity that terrified me. He stepped into my space, his eyes searching mine like he was reading my soul, and whispered, "Tell me why you are really leaving, or I am walking out of here with you." He does not wait for my answer. He just glances down at the mug still sitting on my table, half full, and asks how the coffee is today, like the question hanging between us a second ago never happened. "I made it a little stronger this time," he adds, "since you always finish it too fast when it is weak." I blink at him, caught completely off guard, because I never once told him that. I just quietly reorder when a cup tastes watery, and somehow he noticed anyway. "It is fine," I mumble, which is technically true and also not remotely what either of us actually wants to be talking about right now. 2 days later he slides a pastry across the counter before I even open my mouth. "The lemon one?" he says, "not the chocolate, since you always regret the chocolate after and complain to me about it." That confession lives exclusively in one very detailed group chat with my best friend, one he absolutely should not have access to. "How do you know that?" I ask, half laughing, half unsettled. He shrugs, infuriatingly calm. "I pay attention," he says simply, like that explains anything at all. A line forms behind me before I can push further, and he is already turning to the next customer with that same easy, effortless charm, leaving me standing there wondering exactly how much attention he has actually been paying, and for how long, and whether any of it means what my chest keeps insisting it might. I catch myself staring at his hands as he works the espresso machine a few minutes later, wondering how someone can pay that much attention without ever quite saying why, and whether I even want him to answer that question honestly. I started coming to this cafe 8 months ago, purely because it had good lighting for sketching and terrible enough Wi-Fi that nobody ever fought me for a table. I did not notice Julian at first, not really, he was just the guy who occasionally corrected my order when I mumbled it wrong. Then one afternoon he complimented a drawing over my shoulder without asking permission, said the shading on my hands looked more alive than most art students he had seen, and I made the catastrophic mistake of being charmed. After that I started coming more often, dressing slightly better, laughing a little louder at his jokes, doing every single embarrassing thing people do when they have convinced themselves a crush might actually go somewhere. My best friend calls it my slow-motion cafe crisis. I prefer to think of it as thorough, long-term research into a man who apparently treats every single person who walks through that door like they are the most interesting human alive, which, I have recently and painfully concluded, includes me only by accident. 8 months of quiet, careful noticing, 8 months of convincing myself it was nothing, and somehow I still keep showing up at that same corner table like some part of me refuses to believe my own conclusion. Renata says I have main character syndrome about a barista, which, honestly, feels a little too accurate for comfort, though I still show up the very next morning anyway. Sketchbook in hand, right back at the same corner table. Some habits, apparently, do not care how much your pride objects, and mine has clearly decided this particular cafe is exactly where it wants to keep making bad decisions on a semi-regular basis. The following week he asks if I want to grab dinner after his shift ends, phrased so casually I almost think I misheard him. I say yes before my brain catches up with my mouth. We end up at a tiny noodle place 2 blocks away, and it is the first time I see him fully out of barista mode, less performance, more person. He tells terrible jokes on purpose just to watch me groan. He steals a dumpling off my plate without asking and looks personally offended when I steal one back. Somewhere between the second round of noodles and him insisting on walking me home even though it is barely 8 in the evening, I catch myself laughing so hard my stomach hurts, genuinely, easily, in a way I have not laughed with anyone in a long time. At my door he lingers a beat too long, like he wants to say something, then just tells me goodnight and thanks me for coming, voice a little rougher than usual, before turning and walking off into the dark, leaving me standing there replaying every single second of the night. I do not sleep much, not out of worry, just the particular restless happiness of someone who spent an entire evening laughing and does not quite know what to do with herself now that it is over. I text Renata 3 separate times before falling asleep, each message increasingly unhinged, culminating in one lone message that just says, "I think I might actually like him," sent at 1 in the morning with zero regrets whatsoever. She replies within seconds despite the hour, just 3 words, "Finally, took you," followed by a string of emojis I genuinely did not know existed until that exact moment. I call my best friend Renata the second I get inside, practically shouting the entire dinner into the phone before she can even say hello properly. "Okay," she says once I finally pause for breath, "so mystery barista fed you noodles, stole your food, and walked you home like a Victorian gentleman. Are you engaged yet?" "Shut up," I tell her, laughing, but he still hasn't actually said anything, real. Renata sighs dramatically on the other end. "Some men communicate through pastries and lemon preferences," she says. "It is a love language. Deeply inconvenient, but valid." I tell her about the coffee, the pastry, all of it, and she goes quiet for a second before saying, softly, "That sounds like someone who notices everything about you and is terrified to say why." I do not have an answer for that, so I just tell her good night, hang up, and lie awake far longer than I should, turning that sentence over and over in my head. I fall asleep eventually, still smiling at my ceiling, phone still warm from the call, feeling, for the first time in a long time, like maybe I have not been imagining all of this after all. My alarm goes off far too early the next morning, and I groan into my pillow before remembering, all at once, exactly why I am smiling before I have even fully opened my eyes. I pick out my outfit a little more carefully than usual, tell myself it means nothing, and am fully aware, the entire time, that it absolutely does. I catch myself in the mirror still smiling and roll my eyes at my own reflection, muttering something about being genuinely hopeless before grabbing my bag and heading straight out the door anyway. A delivery guy starts flirting with me the following Tuesday, right there at my usual table, leaning in a little too close while dropping off my order, and I catch Julian watching from across the room with an expression I cannot quite name. He does not say anything. He just walks over a moment later, sets down a fresh coffee I did not order, and tells the delivery guy, pleasantly, almost too pleasantly, that he is going to need that table back soon for a reservation. There is no reservation. The delivery guy leaves anyway. I raise an eyebrow at Julian once we are alone. "Reservation?" I ask. He shrugs, completely unbothered, wiping down a table that clearly does not need wiping. "Table's popular today," he says, not looking at me, though the tips of his ears have gone slightly pink. I decide not to push it, mostly because the small, ridiculous flutter in my chest is doing enough talking for both of us already. I catch him glancing at that table again a few minutes later, jaw still faintly tense, like he is making sure the delivery guy actually left the building entirely and did not just circle back for a second attempt. I decide, watching him fuss over an already spotless counter, that whatever this is between us, jealous barista included, is definitely more entertaining than anything else currently happening in my very quiet, very ordinary life. He catches me watching him a moment later and raises an eyebrow, silently asking what, and I just shake my head, biting back a smile, letting him wonder exactly as much as he keeps letting me wonder about him. Our almost dates become actual dates after that, though neither of us ever quite says the word out loud. We walk through the park on his day off, hands brushing constantly, neither of us brave enough to just hold on properly. He buys me flowers once, badly wrapped, clearly grabbed last minute from a stall near the cafe, and gets flustered explaining that he just saw them and thought of me, which is somehow more charming than if he had planned it perfectly. One evening, standing outside my building, he reaches up and tucks a strand of hair behind my ear, his hand lingering a second too long against my cheek, and for one breathless moment I am completely certain he is about to kiss me. Then his phone buzzes violently in his pocket, some emergency at the cafe apparently, and he pulls back, apologizing, promising to make it up to me, leaving me standing there with my heart still racing and absolutely no clearer answer than before. I touch my own cheek once he is gone, still able to feel exactly where his hand had been, and spend the rest of the night convincing myself it meant something without ever quite managing to fully believe it. Renata tells me later that flustered barista almost kisses you but gets interrupted by his own phone. Sounds like the setup to either a great love story or a mildly frustrating sitcom, and honestly at this point I am prepared for either outcome. He makes it up to me 2 days later with a walk along the river and an actual, deliberate, unmistakable kiss goodnight, soft and a little hesitant, like he had been rehearsing it in his head just as much as I secretly had. A classmate from my old design program, Matteo, starts showing up at the cafe not long after that, ordering slowly, chatting with me at my table, clearly and openly interested in a way that is honestly kind of flattering after weeks of confusing signals from Julian. Julian's whole demeanor shifts whenever Matteo is around, jaw tight, movements clipped, though he never once says a cruel word to the guy, just becomes noticeably, aggressively attentive to me instead, refilling my coffee I did not ask for, appearing at my table every few minutes with some flimsy excuse. After Matteo finally leaves one afternoon, Julian slides into the seat across from me, uninvited, and asks, tightly, if that guy comes around a lot. Just old classmates, I say, watching him carefully. Julian nods once, jaw still tense, and mutters something under his breath that sounds suspiciously like keep it that way, before catching himself and forcing an easier smile, though it does not quite reach his eyes. Not yet, he adds quietly, almost to himself, and I file that word away carefully, wondering exactly what still needs to happen before whatever this is becomes something he is finally ready to name. I say hesitantly, whatever the reason is, to actually hear it eventually. He looks at me for a long moment, something soft and pained flickering behind his eyes, then just nods once, quiet, before I wait, breath held. Whatever it is, he finally says, quiet and steady, I promise it is not because I don't trust you with it, it's because I'm terrified of what happens after I finally say it out loud, and something about that honesty makes the waiting feel a little more bearable. The weeks that follow are, honestly, some of the happiest of my entire year so far. Julian starts walking me home every single night regardless of the weather, holds my hand properly now, no more almost. We fall into easy little rituals, him saving me the last lemon pastry before the morning rush finishes them off, me leaving small doodles of him on his break room whiteboard that he pretends to hate and clearly does not erase. My sketchbook fills up with him without me even fully realizing it, his hands around a mug, his laugh mid-joke, the specific way he frowns at a difficult espresso order. Renata says I am insufferable now, constantly smiling at my phone, and honestly, she is completely right. I just cannot bring myself to care. For the first time since this whole thing started, it finally feels less like unrequited longing and more like something real. I catch myself, more than once, wondering what exactly he still has not told me, but the happiness is warm enough, close enough, that I let the question sit quietly in the background instead of chasing it too hard. Some mornings he greets me before I even step through the door, like he has been watching for me, and instead of finding that strange I just find myself hurrying a little faster to get there. It should probably occur to me, at some point, to ask exactly how he always seems to know, but happiness has a way of quietly talking you out of asking the questions that might complicate it. So instead I just let myself enjoy it, the coffee, the company, the strange warm feeling of being known this thoroughly by someone who still has not fully explained why. One night, after closing, Julian asks me to stay while he finishes cleaning up, and we end up sitting on the counter together in the empty cafe, low lights, quiet music, no customers left to perform for. I ask him, gently, why he gets so weird whenever another guy talks to me. He is quiet for a long moment, turning his rag over in his hands like it might give him the right words. There's a reason I pay attention to you the way I do, he finally says, voice low, careful. It's not just, I don't know how to explain it without sounding insane. If you are following this story anywhere else, just know the real version lives here, at Withered Petals story, and I am really glad you are still here with me through it. I wait, breath held, hoping he will finally say more, but he just shakes his head slightly and says, "Not yet, I will tell you, I promise, just not yet," and something in his voice makes me believe him enough to let it go, for now. He reaches over and squeezes my hand once before hopping down off the counter to finish locking up, and I sit there a while longer, watching him move around the empty cafe, wondering just how heavy that unspoken reason must be if it still has not found its way out after all these weeks. I do not push. Some part of me already senses that whatever he is holding onto is not the kind of thing you rush someone into saying, so instead I just wait, quietly, the same way he apparently has been waiting for something too. Whatever it is, I decide, walking home that night under a sky full of stars neither of us mentions, it can wait exactly as long as it needs to. Small things start not quite adding up though. A regular customer mentions offhand that Julian has never once walked another girl home in the 2 years she has been coming here, said with a knowing little smile that makes my chest warm and my stomach uneasy at the same time. Another time I catch him staring at me across the cafe with an intensity that feels almost too heavy for a simple crush, gone the second he notices me noticing. I mention it to Renata, half joking, that sometimes it feels like he is looking at me like I am the only solid thing in a room that is otherwise on fire. She goes quiet for a beat too long before saying, carefully, that maybe that reason he mentioned is bigger than either of us is guessing. I brush it off at the time, chalk it up to overthinking, the same overthinking that got me halfway out the door back in chunk 1, but some small, quiet part of me does not fully believe my own reassurance. That night I catch myself scrolling back through old photos on my phone, looking at his face in each one a little differently, searching for whatever it is everyone else seems to have noticed before I did. I do not find an answer, not that night anyway, just a growing pile of evidence that something about this whole thing is bigger and stranger than a simple crush, and I am too far in now to just quietly walk away from finding out what. Renata offers, half serious, to interrogate him herself over coffee sometime. And honestly, at this point, I am almost tempted to actually let her. One evening a storm knocks out power across half the neighborhood, and Julian shows up at my apartment unannounced, flashlight in hand, insisting he just wanted to make sure I was not sitting alone in the dark being dramatic about it. We end up on my couch by candlelight, and at some point, exhausted and comfortable, I fall asleep against his shoulder without meaning to. When I wake hours later, the power's still out, he has not moved an inch, arm carefully wrapped around me, wide awake, watching the window like he is standing guard against something only he can see. "You didn't have to stay," I mumble, half asleep still. "I wanted to," he says quietly, voice rougher than usual. "I don't like the idea of you being anywhere I'm not. Not when it's dark like this. It should probably worry me more than it does. Instead it just makes me curl in closer, safe, warm, and completely unaware of how literally he means it." In the morning, once the power finally comes back and the sun is properly up, he makes us both breakfast in my kitchen like it is the most natural thing in the world, humming something under his breath, and I decide not to overthink the strange, steady comfort of having him there. Renata texts me an hour later, just one word, "Well," and I send back a single photo of my kitchen table, 2 plates, his jacket on the chair, no caption necessary at all. She sends back an entire paragraph of exclamation points, followed immediately by a demand for full details, and I spend the rest of my train ride to nowhere in particular grinning at my phone like a complete idiot. The morning everything falls apart starts ordinarily enough. Julian is off running an errand, and I stop by the cafe anyway, mostly out of habit now more than caffeine need. I ask one of the other baristas, casually, where Julian went. Before he can answer, a woman a few tables over, someone I vaguely recognize as a semi-regular, looks up and smiles warmly at me. "Oh, are you a friend of his?" she asks. "He is so sweet, honestly. We just got back from a trip together, you have to try that little town he took us to, it was gorgeous." My whole body goes very still. A trip. Together. My mind immediately drags up every warm smile he has ever given a stranger, every effortless charm I convinced myself did not apply to me. And slots this new information in perfectly, painfully, right where I always secretly feared it belonged. The woman keeps talking, something about the weather that weekend, a lovely little inn, but I am no longer really hearing any of it, just nodding along on autopilot while something inside my chest quietly starts packing its own bags. Somewhere behind the counter, one of the other baristas glances at me, worried, but I just force a smile and pretend everything about this conversation is completely fine. I finish my coffee I no longer really want, gather my things slowly, and leave without saying a single word to anyone about what I just heard, carrying the entire weight of it quietly out the door with me instead. Outside, the sun feels a little too bright for how everything inside me currently feels, and I put my sunglasses on mostly just to buy myself a few more minutes before I have to actually process any of it. I do not correct her. I do not ask a single follow-up question. I just smile, thank her, and walk out of the cafe with my chest caving in on itself, 13 weeks of careful hope collapsing under one offhand sentence from a stranger who has no idea what she just did. I do not cry, not yet, I am too numb for that. I just walk home slowly, replaying every sweet moment of the past 2 months and recoloring all of it with doubt, the flowers, the storm, the hand-holding, all of it suddenly feeling like something he probably does for everyone. Something I was simply naive enough to think was special. That evening an old coworker emails me about a design position abroad I had half-heartedly applied for months ago. Back before any of this started. I read it twice, then reply within the hour, accepting, before I can talk myself out of it. It feels less like an actual decision and more like flinching away from a stove I have already burned myself on once, and honestly, in the moment, that distinction does not feel like it matters very much at all. I do not tell Renata right away either. For once I just want to sit alone with the hurt for a while, quietly, before anyone else's opinion gets mixed in with my own already complicated feelings about all of it. I sit on my kitchen floor for a while that evening, back against the cabinets, staring at nothing, trying to figure out exactly when hope had quietly become the thing I trusted least about myself. By the time I finally get up off the floor, my decision already feels made, less like a choice and more like the only exit left available to me. I do not tell Julian. I tell myself it is easier this way, cleaner, less humiliating than explaining that I overheard something and fell apart over it without even asking him directly. I stop responding to his texts as quickly. I start taking the long way to avoid walking past the cafe. 3 days later, packing the last of my things into a suitcase at nearly midnight, exhausted and hollow, I hear frantic knocking on my door, followed almost immediately by my name, loud, panicked, unmistakably his. I open the door and he is standing there, chest heaving like he ran the whole way, eyes dropping instantly to the suitcase sitting open behind me on my bed. His whole expression changes, shifting from worry into something sharper, more desperate. "Where are you going?" he asks, voice shaking, and before I can answer he crosses the room and grabs my hand, tight, almost too tight, like he is afraid I will disappear the second he lets go. "Say something," he says, quieter now, "please," and the raw panic in his voice is enough to make me forget, just for a second, every careful excuse I had rehearsed for exactly this moment. My throat tightens, and for a second I almost tell him everything right there in the doorway. But the suitcase is still sitting open behind me, undeniable, and some stubborn, wounded part of me refuses to just let it go that easily. I take a slow breath instead. Meeting his eyes properly for the first time since he burst through that door, bracing myself for whatever is about to come out of my own mouth next. I finally let it all out, everything I have been swallowing for weeks. I tell him about the woman at the cafe, the trip, how easily he charms every single person who walks through that door, how exhausting it has been convincing myself I was different when clearly I am just one more person in a very long line. His grip on my hand tightens further as I speak, jaw working, and by the time I finish he looks almost feral, something raw and unguarded breaking through the calm he always keeps so carefully in place. Them, he says, voice cracking, they are just a bunch of rubbish. I don't give a shit about them, I only care about you. The words come out too loud, too fast, and immediately after saying them his whole face crumples. And to my shock, this steady, composed man starts to cry right there in my doorway, shoulders shaking, like something he has held together for a very long time has finally, completely broken open. I stand there frozen, hands still caught in his, watching this steady, unshakable man come completely undone in my doorway, and I have absolutely no idea what to do except stay exactly where I am. My own eyes sting without permission, watching him fall apart in front of me, all the frustration I walked in with dissolving into something far more complicated, tender, and slightly terrifying to look directly at. I reach out instinctively and wipe one tear from his cheek with my thumb, and he leans into the touch like it is the only steady thing left holding him together right now. That trip, he says once he can speak again, voice raw, was not a vacation, it was my mother. She has a condition, has had it since I was a kid, something that flares up without warning ever since my father used to hurt her. She goes missing sometimes when it gets bad. Years ago she was found on the side of the road, feverish, alone, and nobody stopped, nobody even slowed down, except one stranger who called an ambulance and stayed with her until it arrived. That stranger was you. I stare at him, memory rushing back slowly, a woman shivering on the pavement, a scared voice on the phone with dispatch, a promise to stay until help came, a memory I filed away years ago as one small ordinary act of kindness and nothing more. That woman that girl asked about, he continues, is my mother's friend from therapy. Her mother has the same condition, we go together for support. I have never once forgotten your face since that night, and when you walked into my cafe 8 months ago, I thought I was losing my mind. My hands go cold, memory finally clicking fully into place, the shivering woman, the ambulance lights, a face I never thought about again until this exact second, standing right in front of me, grown, and looking at me like I hung the entire sky. I press a hand to my own mouth, memory and present colliding all at once, 13 years old and shivering myself that night, calling for help with hands too small to be steady. Never once imagining any of it would find its way back to me like this. He sinks slowly to his knees right there in my doorway, still holding on to my hand like a lifeline, forehead pressed against my knuckles. Please don't leave, he says, voice breaking completely now. I know how this sounds. I know I should have told you sooner instead of just quietly watching over you and hoping you would eventually just know. But I didn't know how to explain that you saved something I could not survive losing without sounding completely unhinged. I have spent years grateful to a stranger I never expected to see again, and then you just walked in one random afternoon and I have been terrified every single day since that I would somehow scare you off before I found the courage to actually tell you the truth. I kneel down in front of him, cupping his face in both hands, feeling the whole weight of 13 weeks of doubt finally dissolving into something steadier, something real. Stay, I whisper, and his whole body seems to sag with relief, forehead dropping against my shoulder, both of us kneeling there together on my hallway floor like the rest of the world has simply stopped existing for a while. Neither of us moves for a long moment, just breathing, just holding on, 13 weeks of doubt and 13 years of quiet gratitude finally meeting somewhere in the middle of my hallway floor. Eventually he laughs, wet and a little embarrassed, wiping his face with the back of his hand, apologizing for the state of himself. And I just pull him closer instead of accepting the apology at all. I do not take the job abroad. I email them the next morning, apologizing, explaining plans have changed, and for once I do not second-guess the decision at all. Julian and I spend that entire weekend just talking, really talking, filling in every gap neither of us had the courage to address before. I meet his mother properly 2 weeks later, and she holds both my hands for a long moment, eyes wet, before simply saying thank you, like the word could ever possibly be enough. Renata, predictably, cries actual tears when I tell her the full story, then immediately demands to know if Julian has any single, equally emotionally intense older brothers. Some days I still catch him watching me a little too intently across the cafe. But now I understand exactly what that look means, and instead of doubt, it just makes me smile and walk straight toward him. My old suitcase still sits in my closet, unpacked, and every so often I catch him glancing at it too, both of us silently, gratefully aware of exactly how differently that particular night could have ended. Sometimes he still shows up at my door with flashlights during ordinary sunny afternoons, just in case, he says, only half joking, and I have stopped pretending I mind it even a little. Matteo, for the record, ended up dating someone from his design cohort a few months later, which Renata insists on bringing up constantly, as if I ever needed the closure in the first place. I just let her have that one, mostly because she is right, and partly because I am far too happy these days to bother arguing about a point that genuinely does not matter to me anymore at all. Thank you so much for staying with this story all the way to the end. It genuinely means everything that you spent this time here with me at Withered Petals story. I still have the old sketchbook page from that very first day, the one with his hands mid-pour, drawn back when I thought he was simply too warm for his own good, too generous with a kindness I assumed could never actually be mine. I found out recently he kept something too, a small folded note from that night on the roadside, the one the paramedics gave him afterward with my name and number scrawled on it, kept safe in his wallet for years before he ever worked up the nerve to actually use it. Sometimes the people who save us do it so quietly we never even notice. And sometimes, if we are lucky, life circles all the way back around and gives us the chance to be saved by them all over again, properly, this time, on purpose. He keeps that little note tucked in his wallet even now, worn soft at the folds, and every time I catch him touching his pocket out of habit, I just reach over and take his hand instead, proof enough that neither of us needs paper to hold on to the other anymore. Thank you again for staying all the way through this one with me, and I will see you in the next story, right here, at Withered Petals Story, where every quiet kindness eventually finds its way back around. And if you ever save a stranger without meaning to, hold on to hope. You truly never know just how far it might eventually travel back to you.